I heard my wife from the other room go, "I'm doing it." And I was like, what are you doing? And she purchased a bidet. And you sit down and the seat heats immediately, and then it sprays up into your undercarriage, and then it blow dries your undercarriage. And I don't really know how to describe how life-changing this has been for me.
Is it life-changing enough that when your podcast co-host went to Japan and sat on one, she took a picture of it?
Yeah. So do you have one?
I do, but mine doesn't have electricity, so I get cold plunge.
You get cold plunge undercarriage every day.
The Hollow Bunny.
Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Hollow Bunny Leadership Podcast. I'm Kristen Zeman, and I am here with my, what are you today? What are you today? It's only 7 a.m. where you are, and yet you look chipper and cheery.
Thank you.
You do. You're my chipper and cheery co-host, Sylvia Moyer.
Okay, I will accept chipper and cheery at this ungodly hour before I took off for work. Yes.
Thank you for getting up so early. We're all on different time zones, and yet you managed. You just sacrificed for all of us, and you look beautiful doing it. You woke up like this. You woke up like this, didn't you?
Rolled out of bed, stumbled out of bed,
tumbled to the kitchen,
and poured myself
a cup of ambition. Wow. A little Dolly. This podcast is sponsored by Dolly Parton. Welcome, bunnies, to the Hollow Bunny Podcast. As you all know, this podcast is not just for cops, even though we are former police chiefs. This podcast is for anyone interested in talking about life and leadership, particularly the lessons that we have learned about both. And those lessons fill up the Hollow Bunny metaphorically. So today, we're talking about a pretty heavy topic about leadership that is really, I think, in line with the concept of the Hollow Bunny.
And let's remember, before we even launch that, let's remember that this is the podcast for those leaders. You've dropped off your kids, you're in your silence, the little miscreants are out of the car, you're dropping them off, or you put your earbuds in, you're on the treadmill, or you're out on a trailer. You're doing this thing right here with Kristen Zeman and Sylvia Moyer to explore leadership, to fill your bunnies. So listeners are set, they're ready to dive into this, and we're going to talk about narcissism, because this is a big deal. So Kristen, we started kind of talking about this. This permeates our organizations. And I was recently with some colleagues that have a new boss, a new head of their organization. Okay. And they were saying, that your Hollow Bunny Leadership Podcast really resonates because this person is like all flash, like big ideas, enthusiastic, this grand strategy, all this stuff, and not getting anything done, not like on the ground, not like doing work that fills people, not really listening, is getting a ton of input, but not listening, just driving forward. And I thought that's super interesting. And a friend said he unearthed an old yet timeless article about narcissism from Harvard Business Review. And you busted my fucking chops on this, didn't you?
Only because the article's from 2001. I mean, I was 6.
2004, fucker.
Okay.
Fuck stick. Judging this judger. That's like 2004. I'm not like a savage where I'd go to 2001. Ew.
You know what, though? The research has not changed on that. And when you brought this up to me, it actually, I thought, well, this is actually a perfect topic for this show, because this is why we launched the Hollow Bunny Podcast, because we were sitting around talking about some hollow bunnies. And I think that a few of those could be labeled as narcissists. in doing, a lot of research on this, not just from the 2004 article, but from present day research, did you know that narcissism it's a clinical definition? It's an actual personality disorder. And that kind of pisses me off because to me, it feels like it almost feels like an excuse of like, oh, I have this disorder, right? When you can look at what I consider to be an asshole boss. What do you think about that?
Well, I think research has informed that there are, and Freud talked about it, and in this article it says there are three main personality types: erotic, obsessive, narcissistic. And erotic, not really sexual, obsessive. Okay, we'll talk about those. I think two things on this. One is that when we have a label, a diagnosis, it gives people kind of seemingly gives them permission to act like an asshole or to
Yeah.
act in accordance with that diagnosis. And that's not what we're talking about. We've talked about this a lot relative to being a victim and all the other things where we are not accepting bad behavior. However, I do think what it does, a diagnosis gives us a framework to understand. And so, where research informs a framework to understand, it gives us an opportunity to evaluate self. And then, as a coworker or a servant of a person like that, a follower of a person that has this kind of diagnosis, it gives us an understanding of kind of the norms of their behavior. You, as a scientist, Kristen Seaman, I think you went to
Yes.
MIT, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I did. I did.
So
Yeah.
you
Yes. Cum laude. Magna.
Magna. Okay, so Freud's definitions of the personality types have kind of evolved over time. So is science telling us. But I think it does both. It gives some people an excuse for behavior. It gives someone to say, well, I am A, or it gives us an understanding. So I think there's utility in it when accepted uh, as a leadership imperative to understand and to operate within, right? Or to break out of a framework, to
Okay.
understand our behaviors. So,
Sure.
how's that land with you?
No, it does. So I have a little confusion because, listen, I think that as human beings, every single one of us has what I would call a, self-centered, I mean, we are the center of our own,
Sure.
universe, right? We are the main character in our own story, and so there is some confusion on what constitutes a narcissist versus, just someone, of course, we're all self-absorbed. This is how we see the world through our own lens. And so I think it's important to have a distinction because there are certain characteristics of narcissistic leaders that doesn't always make you a narcissist, right? But it's like, I think that as we delve into them, one thing that people say is a narcissistic leader is usually charismatic. Well, I know a lot of charismatic leaders that are not narcissists. And so I think there's a cautionary, just a caveat there is that, just one particular label. I think it's when you add them all up together, you've got a lack of empathy. You've got a need for admiration. Here's the thing that I think differentiates it, and you tell me if you think that this is what does it for you, like what the tipping point is. For me, it's a fragile ego. It is that it's this deep need for admiration and a belief that they're superior to others, but that it comes from this low self-esteem, fragile ego, and they're vulnerable to criticism. That's where I think it is the line drawn. What about you?
Without a doubt. So we all have this narcissistic tendency, right? This
Right.
kind of driven, it's what drives us. Many of the traits of the narcissist really advance innovation and pushing the envelope
Yeah.
and being edgy and doing that stuff that is really, really important for advancing technology and advancing business. Okay, we acknowledge that. We're not talking about that for the Hollow Bunny podcast, leadership podcast listeners. We're talking about the narcissist, and let's make this distinction. They gain power and glory through their own kind of affirmation.
Yeah.
They are typically really typically isolated and fragile, and they don't trust people. And that's what we're talking about. And we're talking about how, because they are independent and aggressive and forward thinking, used too much, as my dad used to say, everyone's strength used to excess becomes their weakness. The
Yeah.
narcissistic weakness is where they are independent and aggressive and forward thinking and driven and inspiring to do. When used too much, it becomes a weakness because they become fragile, like you talked about.
Yeah. And, and I think another, as I'm thinking about this, because I'm completely triggered by this topic, because as I have said many times in, the course of all of our careers, we have mentors and we have tormentors. And I have a particular tormentor, throughout my career, and classic narcissism. And you talk about checking every box, very charismatic, but the difference was, that they were very manipulative and also takes credit. So all of those great, what you just outlined for me, I think, are innovators, and the whole idea of our ego is that driven people have to have a healthy sense of ego, confidence, and so, but then of course that when it goes into the dark side is when they start taking credit for other people's work, stealing ideas, show little empathy or interest in anyone else, have to be the center of attention, put other people down to elevate themselves. I mean,
Hmm.
the list goes on, right? And so I think that's important to understand that we have these qualities that drive us, that ambition, and that confidence, but that, like anything in life, you have both positive and negative. And when you go into the dark side of it, that's when it can, go into that, quote, narcissism, as far as the, it being, an actual, I don't know what you call it.
Here's the thing. I'm going to pull on this thread, Kristen. Two things. I want to hear, like, what does that look like in terms of the manipulation? And then really, let's pull on this thread to have this conversation about what came up, right? And that is the narcissist. It came up in this conversation with folks. The narcissist is always looking out for enemies, and
Yeah.
when they degrade, they have this sense of paranoia that is really debilitating. So
Yeah.
I think we all want to hear, what do you mean by the narcissist in this person? You are your tormentor. What does that mean? What did that look like?
So, funny, the charismatic part really comes out. And, what I learned very quickly was, that, kind of a magnet to people. But what he did was he drew you in, and he had this, and it took me a long time to figure this out, and so he would offer up something that was, you felt like he was telling you something that he wasn't telling anyone else. And it was like he, kind of offered a little piece of himself. But what I found out, though, or what I realized, that it was often at the detriment of someone else. He would judge people and talk behind their back. And then he would try to get you to, open up about something. And then he would take what you say and twist it, and use it against you.
Mm.
But I think most importantly, from what I learned, and I worked for him first in my career, then I worked with him. And, and I saw this, all of these personality traits, but most importantly, what I learned was there was how vulnerable he was to criticism, even when asking a question. And I think,
Oh,
here's what I think a great leader does. A
okay.
great leader allows their people to look at them and say, why did you make that decision, without feeling attacked? And a great leader, when they make a decision, they're able to say, here's the decision that I made, and here are the reasons why. Have that communication versus notification. But any good leader should be able to, really articulate the reasons that they make a decision. This man, when confronted with any kind of decision, would call it, an ambush. Don't ambush me. And I thought, well, that is so interesting. And so any kind of attack. And then I started to recognize, as I was able to peel the onion layers away, how fragile this man was. You
Right.
couldn't question him. You could not disagree with him. And that's what but the manipulative part was really more due to that charismatic personality.
Okay, this is a big deal. It's going to trigger some folks because my hunch is that folks, as you described that story, we're going to picture somebody. We're going to picture somebody. So the
There's
difference
somebody in
between,
your mind right now that just popped into
right,
your mind.
and this
Yeah.
dude that you're talking about is like the difference between God and this guy is God doesn't believe he's that guy. That guy
Yeah.
kind of believes he's God. That guy,
Yep.
when challenged for the why or the understanding, he's triggered. And did he demonstrate rage?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
That is what has come up in all of the research, all the things that I've read about this kind of narcissistic leader. They say things like you just described. Oh, don't ambush me. Don't surprise me. I don't want to be surprised. And they don't want to be questioned. They're paranoid. And while they have these charismatic, let's move this forward piece to their personality, the degrading effect is the rage, the isolation, the distrust, and things like you've said, related to how that guy that you're describing showed up. I want to pull this apart. Orrin Harari wrote a book about the 21 leadership secrets of Colin Powell. And Colin Powell said to this piece, separate self from role. And he was known to have say that because we need to separate ourself from the role we fill. And you're describing a guy that sounds like he could not distinguish self from role. Everything he did was about self. His role kind of amplified his his reach, his influence, his authority, but he was seeking power in that narcissistic way that was about him. Does that resonate with you? And well, hang on, before you answer that, Colin Powell also said distinguish self and role in a way that then when the role goes, the self is not eroded. The self should always be standing. And the with praise and with condemnation, it's largely for the role. But when people meld the two, there's a degrading effect to the human being with any kind of criticism. What's that do for you?
Yeah, it does, except that I would push back a little bit here because I know people who innocently meld their identity with their role, and they are not narcissists.
Fair.
They struggle. I mean, and there are a lot of people, especially, in a profession like ours that is so very, team oriented, and I'm sure a lot of professions like this, but it's like when you have a title, insert title here, and then in some time in your life you're separated from that title, you do have perhaps a little identity crisis there, and it doesn't make you a narcissist. I think the difference is, and maybe there's something here about, do you love your position more than you love your people? And that to me might be
Wow.
an indicator of that. So I just want to be cautious because people do, it doesn't make them bad to have this identity in what we do for a living. I mean, I went through that. I had an existential identity crisis when I left policing, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is the thing I've done for 30 years of my life. What am I without it? And, it turns out that's that's kind of a journey of self-reflection that you have to go on. And so I want to be careful there about identity, but, and I think the difference is, and look for self-promotion, a lack of genuine concern for others, the tendency to take credit for successes and deflect blame, and so it's like these negative traits that truly supersede even that identity piece. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, right. I think what we found in our firsthand experience and then being witness to leadership, there are people that focus so much on the task and on the stuff that they forget it's people that carry it out. I
Yeah.
have been part of teams where it's people first, mission always. People drive the mission. Let's start with people and talking about people and to love others more than self. And you know what it brings up for me, Kristen, is this book that you and I both read, The Second Mountain by David Brooks, that really kind of underscores some of this. Now let's see that the narcissist that we're talking about is not the one that has this healthy relationship with their influence, their inspiration, their drive, looking toward the future, really moving things forward through people. There's some healthy narcissism that little seeds actually advance what we do. What we're
Yeah.
talking about is that degrading narcissist who manipulates, like Kristen said, has episodes of rage, is isolated and distrustful. If you don't trust people as a
Yeah.
norm, that is a problem. because people can feel it. And to your point, to love people more than you love your position, there is a really healthy kind of examination that you have to do with yourself related to that.
Yeah, and I think it kind of comes back to also, just like the basic foundational rules of leadership. And when you ask yourself, there to me there are three gates for which, as a leader, my decisions went through. Number one, am I doing the right thing? And I'm going to add an asterisk there. Am I doing the right thing for the organization? Because you can phrase that sentence, am I doing the right thing for myself? Am I doing the right thing for my cronies? Am I doing the right thing, to advance my own agenda? You have to put, am I doing the right thing for the organization, for the right reasons and at the right time? And if you can pass a yes through those three gates, to me, that is how you check yourself. Now, here's the problem, Sylvia, and you and I both know this. You know how often we talk about, when you talk about maybe even like diversity and inclusion, and you have conferences, and the people who show up at the conferences are the people who get it, the people who already understand, right? So this is, I don't know any, I don't know any narcissist that knows they're a narcissist.
It's like,
And so
you know who the asshole in the room is? You're likely the asshole.
It's probably you.
It's
probably you.
Yeah.
Exactly. So herein lies the rub, is that for great leaders, and I'm talking the level 5 leadership that we study, right? Never ever will ever have I attained a level 5 leadership. I to me, it's one of those things that is completely unattainable. It's always that thing that's beyond our grasp, but we try. But see, the great leader, it's kind of funny, is that they always feel like they're falling short. And it's that great leader that has the humility to say, gosh, I'm not the smartest person. It's that great leader that says, I'm humble enough to know what I don't know, and I lean on others in order to stave off being self-centered, to be a narcissist. One has to have the self-reflection to question, to hold the mirror up to our own faces and say, am I being too egocentric? Am I being too self-absorbed? Is my ego in charge here? And yet and great leaders are able to step back and do that, while the narcissist is incapable of holding the mirror up. So how then does a narcissist actually cure themselves of narcissism? It's this cyclical thing.
It's unthinkable. How do you know?
How do you know?
How can you even know you're an asshole before? Okay.
Yes.
So the practical reality of this podcast, of our time here with our folks, is to say, okay, there's very little business literature, psychological, social literature that says, hey, narcissist, this is how you avoid the pitfalls of being a narcissist. And fuck it, even if there was, they're not going to read it, right?
No.
So let's talk about this. We know that the narcissist, we talk all the time about the second mountain, about doing the work that is altruistic, it's benevolent, it's the work that's for the people, and loving your people enough to be the person that guides them forward. The narcissist, as we understand it, and I just wrote down on my handy pad, they're sensitive to criticism. They're poor listeners. They lack empathy. They have a distaste for mentoring. They have such a deep desire to compete and to be that person, this big person, that there's like an absence of understanding of how they're actually in it, doing all the things that advance, that bring people in, that are enthusiastic. They're actually degrading the organization and their leadership standard.
Yeah.
So how do we operate in that? We choose courage over comfort. We choose to operate not in the system with the narcissist, where I think we, as people that are operating with a narcissist, say, okay, I'm going to choose courage over comfort. I'm going to consistently talk about people. I'm going to demonstrate the qualities of being a good listener, of mentoring others. I'm going to demonstrate empathy. I'm not going to be sensitive to criticism. I'm going to demonstrate it from where I am in the organization, that I'm going to take criticism. You call it throwing spears. I'm going to say, okay, I feel that, I hear it, and this then makes sense of decision making and strategy and tactics for people from where you sit.
Yeah, but you're giving the narcissist a lot of credit that they're going to ask themselves those
They're
questions.
not.
I mean,
Okay,
maybe
they're not.
maybe there should be a quiz that says and there probably is. Honestly, there probably is a quiz that is entitled "Are you a narcissist?" So if you think you might be a narcissist, I invite you to research that. So instead of talking about the narcissists themselves, let's talk about
Yep.
probably what's more prevalent: the people who have to work with narcissists. So coping strategies.
Right.
If you are working for a narcissistic leader, it is vital people to set boundaries to protect your mental health. And that means that when you are in a situation with this particular narcissist who is going to suck you in manipulative ways, keep it completely business, because the narcissist that I'm thinking of that pops into my head would always suck me in, with these,
Yep.
kind of, personal, like, he would share something personal, and then I would get sucked into that thinking, oh gosh, maybe this guy isn't so bad. And then 10 out of 10 times, as I said, he would manipulate what I said. And that was, so you have to be very, very cautious. So in coping with them, just remember, just to set your boundaries, and remember, it's not your job to fix them. You need to focus on what you can control and seek support from your colleagues. Sometimes this actually brings people together when you work for a narcissist, where it actually strengthens the bonds of
Yep.
you and your colleagues. So and organizations suffer from having these narcissistic leaders. So but I don't know how to fix the narcissist, but so instead I think we have to
Response.
manage ourselves, our response.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is what a lot of folks have talked about when working for a narcissist, is just what you talked about. And from the position they're in, they've got to indoctrinate, they've got to get the organization to be healthy from where they sit, given their sphere of influence. And they demonstrate those things, those characteristics, those qualities, where they demonstrate what the narcissist is not to be a contrarian to the narcissist, not to show they're
Mhm.
better than the narcissist, but they are open to criticism. They are good leaders. They engage in empathy. They mentor, and they are mentored. And then competition is about advancing the organization, the strategy and mission of the organization, instead of self. That's
Yeah.
what you do. You demonstrate all the qualities that are not the narcissist, and
Yeah.
and I
Right.
and find healthy ways to not get intoxicated or trapped or baited, as you've talked about, by what the narcissist gives you. Here's what I've learned in relationships, and business and work is a relationship. Leadership and followership is a relationship. Okay, is that the narcissist gives you that one little piece that you're like, huh, that feels really good.
Yeah.
But it's a fucking nibble. It's a little nibble that
Yeah.
they give you that one piece that's that personal thing, and you bite on it, and it starts kind of taking hold. So there's a consciousness piece about, okay, take the nibble, but then say, okay, thank you, and dismiss it, and then keep walking your path as that leader of character.
Yeah, so two things there, to kind of bring this home. It's what we've talked about many times, and, about life and leadership. Sometimes the best lessons that we get in both, in our personal lives and in our professional lives, are honestly an example of what not to do. And to really take in all of the data, from these people who exhibit these negative qualities, and to commit, as a friend, as a parent, as a human, as a leader, not to do those things. But I
Yep.
think the telltale sign of a narcissist, and I think this is maybe just again, to really pinpoint, is that don't get sucked in to that charisma, but pay very close attention to what happens when things fall apart, when things do not go their way, and when they feel attacked. That's both in your personal and professional life. It's like you start a relationship with someone, you start to realize, gosh, when they feel attacked, when things don't go their way, or when you say no to something, is when they start lashing out. The same is true in leadership. And the difference is the impact that it has on organizations. So I think just knowing how to manage that and to protect your mental health, surrounding that will help you. We're not going to solve the problem of narcissists because, they have to solve them themselves. So, we can only really just, build honestly a buffer around ourselves. And as you so eloquently said, just, be the antithesis of that.
Like you said, and like we're talking about, this is more about those leaders who, if they're listening to this podcast, they want to get a little nugget, something to think about, something to marinate on, to improve the way that they lead and the way they kind of engage with the world, with self and the world. Working for a narcissist, I went into an organization, they worked for a narcissist, this kind of idea of grandiosity and this isolation, and kept book and files on everybody, even the people that should be their most trusted. Finding a way to engage with that person where it doesn't degrade your soul, and you can earn the trust through demonstrations, repeated demonstrations of your character, and staying on the high road, kind of void of them, being outside of them, is this really important piece. And so,
and you know what I think what else is a really important piece, and this took me a really long time to figure out, is that you're not crazy. Because you know how many times I felt like I'm like, am I insane here? Is this guy, is this actually happening to me? And I think it causes, this is like the ultimate gaslighting. It's like they cause you to question your own sanity. And so I think the most important thing that you can do is to just make sure that you tell yourself, okay, I am not crazy. This is happening. This manipulation is happening. These Machiavellian tendencies are exhibited within this individual. This is not me. I am not crazy, because narcissists have such an uncanny ability to make you feel like you are fucking crazy.
Completely fucking nuts. And so really what you've described is kind of this journey to recognize this is about their struggle with themselves. This is not, and once and there's a great Rumi statement that I read once that in essence says this, that if we can treat someone's behavior as their struggle with themselves instead of a description of my interaction with them or my standing in the world, then it becomes easier. And this response to the stimulus that is the negative, narcissistic, grandiose, egotistical kind of behavior, this pathological behavior, is that we just say, this is your struggle with you, sir. And you don't have to say it, but to act like that is then to, what I do is the cleansing breath, and to say, I am going to consistently walk my path in a position of character and a demonstration of my values to everyone. And when it's about the people in the organization, it removes you from kind of biting on what is their negativity. And so, and from being intoxicated,
you know what?
Nibble they give you, right?
Yeah, what you said is actually what changed me. So here was my cleansing moment, was when I began to discover that this was a broken man who truly, genuinely has no self-esteem, who is the most insecure, fragile person. It actually made me go, oh my gosh, I feel bad for him. And this is not the whole bullshit of give people grace, because I'm actually that grates on me. I'm actually sick of that shit. Give people grace. No, fuck that. Some people don't deserve grace. But
and just move on.
Right. But what it did for me, though, was make me, honestly, it made me kind of put him like, oh, you poor little pathetic human. You will never, you'll never be whole because you are so broken. And that's why you treat other people so badly. And once I reframed it, honestly, then I was able to go on about my life and then walk the path as you have described, where I knew that as long as I didn't behave like him or others like him. And so I think that's the lesson, bunnies. I think that, if you are dealing with people, you just have to recognize it for what it is and, consider it pathetic, which sort of gives you a little bit of an upper hand there. If that's, maybe I'm no psychiatrist, but that's what helped me. So.
Right. And, you're a scientist, but not a psychiatrist.
I am. That's right. Yes. I'm a lot of things.
Okay, so when we recap this is really so much goes back to Viktor Frankl, right? And his statement between stimulus and response, there's this space, and in that space lies our freedom. And so, what the urging is for all of us to examine as leaders, are we over relying on those things that give us influence, that really drive us forward, that healthy narcissism that drives us forward? Have we used it too much that maybe we need to recalibrate, right? So this self-assessment, find somebody, your critic, find somebody that's going to say, hey, here's where you are. This is being amplified too much. And they're in a psychologically safe space. You're in a psychologically safe space to hear it. And then to give it for the people you serve that role
That's
for.
right.
The other piece is for those that are following is recognize perhaps those, this is their struggle with themselves, and demonstrate through your behaviors, your values that are on full display for everybody, those things that butt up against and push back against the narcissist, and their struggle with themselves. And that is a liberating piece. So we're saying
It is.
fuck giving people grace at this point, and we're saying, look,
That's
sometimes
probably unpopular. That's probably an unpopular stance for me to take. Fuck giving people grace. But honestly, it's like people say that all the time at bad behavior. Just give them grace. I don't know. That's a whole other podcast, Sylvia.
it
You've
is.
set
And
me off.
I've triggered you. I've triggered
Yeah,
you.
I'm so
This is
triggered by this episode.
Yeah, and then in that episode, we'll talk about being a hostage negotiation person and just saying, really, and your response to someone in crisis. So that needs to
Yeah.
be broken apart. There's a psychological inventory we need to
Yeah.
say. But
Yeah.
here's the big thing is if we treat it as that person has some value, perhaps, but used to excess, it becomes their weakness, and we are going to drive forward in our leadership imperative saying, okay, this is your struggle with you. This does not reflect my standing in this organization, in the places where I lead. That's what we're saying.
Yes. Yes. And if you are listening and you think, oh my gosh, am I a narcissist?
Call Kristen.
You
Call
know
Kristen.
what?
Her number is call Kristen.
Call
Uh,
me. Call
let's
me. Yeah, call me and I'll tell you, you probably are. But if you actually think you're a narcissist, actually, this is what I mean. You're probably not if you're even questioning it. It's if you think that's not me, it's probably you.
well,
If
and
you're like, I'm not a narcissist, you probably are.
right back to the beginning. Does the diagnosis help? I don't know. I think we just talk about that's a framework for understanding, but let's do
Yeah.
kind of an inventory of self. Like, how am I showing up in the world? That's kind of how Moyer simple mind kind of engages. But how am I showing up
Yeah.
in the world?
And seek feedback. Honestly, this is what narcissists don't do. So one of the things that you can do to be a better leader, forget attaching a label to it, just to be a better leader in general, is to reach out to people and allow people to give an assessment of
Yeah.
your performance. How am I doing? How am I showing up? Am I doing okay? Am I fulfilling the role in the organization and as a leader to you? And and so maybe just start there. How am I doing? And maybe bunnies, that's how we continue to add substance by continually fighting for feedback.
Yep. And then, since you just asked for feedback, Kristen, I just want to tell you, this bronze skin gun show, smoke show thing we've got going on here.
What?
For people that don't watch, maybe they need to tune in. Look at that kick in the bicep. Pow!
Well, everybody, thank you for showing up today. As always, we appreciate our millions of followers who continue to show up every 2 weeks when this podcast drops. So we would like to thank Ted Madden, who produces this podcast. And the song that you are about to hear was written and performed exclusively by my handsome and talented son, Jake Zeman, and his friends, Fabian and Zoe. If you like listening to the Hollow Bunny Leadership Podcast, we'd love it if you would subscribe. We would love it if you would like it. If you would review it and tell everyone you know about it. Share this episode. Share an episode that you like. Right now we have a line of sponsors that are just trying to, knock down our door, and we're really trying to decide which ones that we're going to land on. Maybe you can help us with that. But you can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And if you don't like the podcast, move along. There's nothing more to see here. Hey, bunnies. Keep filling up your own bunnies with substance and continue to add value and substance to others. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, everyone.
to fight the hollow bunny. And we all feel hollow sometimes, but the monsters are only in your mind. It's a tough pill to swallow, but if you're brave and kind, you'll be alright. If you fight the hollow bunny. When the challenge ahead scares you to death, you tame the imposter inside instead. To change the world, you've got to start small. It takes a leader to say, I don't know it all. And I know I'm gonna fall, but I'll pick it up and come back stronger. Failing forward and moving onward, doing the hard thing and the right thing, forever fighting the hollow bunny. And we all feel hollow sometimes, but the monsters are only in your mind. It's a tough pill to swallow, but if you're brave and kind, you'll be alright. If you fight the hollow bunny. If you're tough on the outside but empty within, something's gonna crack, you've gotta start again. You're tough on the outside but empty within, something's gonna crack, you've gotta start again. The monsters are